Kindness and character, that's what we're talking about here today on the Why It Matters Catholic Podcast. As always, I am Brandon Powell, and this is the Why It Matters Catholic Podcast, where we explore the imitation of Christ. I want to encourage you to take some time and visit my website, www.whyitmatterscatholic.org. Again, whyitmatterscatholic.org. There you can find a link to book me as a speaker, read my blog, listen to this podcast, and more. And I want to thank everyone who has supported, shared my posts, and liked them, and just in general, given me a voice. But as we are talking about the imitation of Christ, we should probably get into that, and we are in chapter 8 of the Knox translation, where it says, quote, "Your kindness. Everybody has a claim on that. But familiarity has its disadvantages. Sometimes we know a person only by reputation, and that reputation a dazzling one. And then we meet him, and it does not bear looking into. And sometimes, perhaps, when we ourselves imagine that people are enjoying our society, they are really beginning to take a dislike to us, having had time to detect the flaws in our character." End quote. Now, it's always important to define your terms. We are talking about kindness, but what is kindness? Father John Hardin's Modern Catholic Dictionary defines kindness as one of the fruits of the Holy Spirit, the quality of understanding sympathy and concern for those in trouble or need. It is shown in affability of speech, generosity of conduct, and forgiveness of injuries sustained. Remember, the fruits of the Spirit are found in Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 through 23. Again, kindness is having the quality of sympathy and concern for those in need. So how is it that everybody has a right or a claim on our kindness? In other words, how can someone have a right to demand kindness from us? The answer is found in what I call the law of charity. Paragraph 2478 of the Catechism says, quote, "To avoid rash judgment, everyone should be careful to interpret, insofar as possible, his neighbor's thoughts, words, and deeds in a favorable way. Every good Christian ought to be more ready to give a favorable interpretation to another's statement than to condemn it. But if he cannot do so, let him ask how the other understands it. And if the latter understands it badly, let the former correct him with love. If that does not suffice, let the Christian try all suitable ways to bring the other to a correct interpretation so that he may be saved." End quote. Think about the points the Catechism brings up here. When we assume the fault of another, that makes us guilty of rash judgment. When we don't interpret people's actions, words, and thoughts in a favorable way, that is rash judgment. When we don't honor the name, respect, and reputation of a person, that is a sin against justice and charity. And all of these are shown in paragraphs 2477 and 2478 of the Catechism. I don't know about you, but this makes me realize just how often I have been guilty of rash judgment. So many times I have interpreted something in a way that paints others in the worst possible light. Isn't it terrible that we are so quick to judge others in the worst possible light, but then excuse our own bad behavior and qualify it with all kinds of excuses? We are not willing to make excuses for others, but we have so many excuses for ourselves. I'm married, and I believe that so many marriages would be healthier if we were willing to interpret everything our spouse did or said in the best possible light. When they forgot to do something important, then we can tell ourselves, maybe they just had a really difficult day. Maybe they're having a hard time and just forgot. Or when our spouse is rude or cold to us, we can say they probably did not mean it that way. Perhaps they were hurt by someone today. Maybe they're just trying to process some things from today and don't realize how they are seeming to us. Maybe I need to interpret what they're doing in a different way. Instead, we tend to personalize it. We think somebody is giving us a hard time rather than that they are having a hard time. We can easily apply this principle to bosses, coworkers, family members, spouses, fellow churchgoers, and even the guy who flips you off in traffic. Interpret everything in the most favorable way for that person. Why do we not want to do this? Well, sometimes we enjoy the moral superiority that we feel when we assume the worst of intentions for somebody else. Sometimes we have been really hurt by people. And if we assume the best of intentions, then it is easier to excuse the pain somebody caused us. Unfortunately, that doesn't always feel right. We want to hold on to that wound. When we assume the best of intentions, it makes it harder to slander others. Slander and gossip are two of the easiest ways for us to hurt people who have hurt us. But what happens when we are willing to interpret everything in the most favorable way for others? It actually frees us. We receive less wounds because it makes it easier for us to stop personalizing everything. It also frees us up to love others, including our spouses, because we are willing to give people clean slates rather than constantly holding history over someone else's head. It frees us to show mercy to others and to ourselves because we can understand others and ourselves better. We are all sinners and we all struggle. When we show grace to others, it is easier to show grace to ourselves. More than that, everyone has a right to our kindness and we have a right to theirs. God is calling us to make the first move. May God bless you and fill you with His grace. Join us next time here on the Why It Matters Catholic Podcast. And don't forget to check out our blog and the other material on our site. God bless.